Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dr. Doctor, the show where no topic is too hot or too cold. Whether it's politics, religion, relationships, entertainment, or everyday life, you will be hearing from the experts. This show is not for the faint of heart or the faint of mind. But if you want to be inspired, you have come to the right place. And now, prepare to be enlightened as we introduce the host of Dr. Doctor, Dr. Peter Tassi, and his close advisor, Dr. Fooch.
Hello and welcome once again to Dr. Doctor. Unfortunately, today we don't have Junior with us to discuss the episode 2, The Great Minds in History. And also we haven't had Dr. Fooch on lately, but he will be joining us again. He's been tied up with a number of things that has taken him away from the podcast, but we will be having Dr. Fooch on again. And so today it's a solo, just me you got to listen to. And I know you enjoy Junior. I know from the comments, Junior is a great guest and people love listening to him. But unfortunately, he can't be here today. And so we are doing it solo. And the person we're going to be looking at today is Friedrich Nietzsche, a 19th century philosopher in Germany. And some people would say he wasn't the greatest, one of the great minds in history. But many people would say he was one of the greatest minds in history. But no doubt, in my mind, I consider him, of all the philosophers, there's so many great minds that we look at. And we'll be looking at some of them, dating all the way back to Socrates. In my mind, no doubt, Nietzsche was one of the great minds in history. He was very controversial, and yet everyone liked him. The young, the old, men, women, the left, the right. They liked him because they liked what he had to say. Many of his teachings were distorted to use for propaganda, especially in the Second World War. That was the work of his sister, who doctored a lot of the writings he left behind to suit the Nazi agenda. But those were not the thoughts of Friedrich Nietzsche. So because of this misconception of what Nietzsche taught, there are people who hated him. There are people who, absent of that propaganda, didn't like what he had to say, because he did say a lot of controversial things. However, most people consider him one of the great minds of history. I personally like Friedrich Nietzsche. He spoke to me in my youth. I can remember 45 years ago when I was in university, I, like most people that go to university, I sought truth. I looked for answers to questions, and I tried to do it as objectively as I could as a young man. I did not want to allow for my background and my upbringing and what I was taught through my childhood and teen years to influence my pursuit of truth. But to abandon all things for truth is a very difficult thing to do, as we all know. To let go of everything and is very painful. You need great courage. So I found that in my own personal pursuit, I liked Nietzsche and what he had to say, what little I understood of him back then as a student in university, because he spoke to my own inner struggle, as I'm sure he speaks to many of you in your struggle in life. I wanted to know, as a young man, are there universal truths? Regarding my own Catholic faith, I struggled with all kinds of issues. On a dogmatic level or theological level, I struggled with the virginity of Mary. Was Jesus the actual Son of God? The possibility of an infallible pope. The idea that there's one true church, and I was in it. And then on another level, I struggled with questions like why women were not allowed to be ordained, why priests had to be celibate, and on it went. So I struggled with all these things, and I really sought out what was true. What should I believe based on what is true? Not what I found most comfortable, not what I've been told to believe. So I set on my own journey. And in that journey in university, I fell in love with the world religions, especially Buddhism. I always found myself returning to my Catholic roots because that's what I was familiar with. That's what I was comfortable with. That was the ground I walked on for so many years. It was my stabilizer. But at the same time, I struggled. So there's this inner battle in me to seek out that which is comfortable, which was what I was raised on, what I was taught to believe, what I taught to be true, and my own inner pursuit to find what is actually true. And I sometimes doubted myself, thinking, well, I'm just a feeble human mind with all its limitations. I certainly wasn't born with any brilliant mind. How could I, little old me, ever discover what is actually true? So all these things were going through my mind, and I struggled with it, and I got through university and wasn't any happier at the end of it. I was still conflicted. But I did come to a conclusion through all of that, through those years. I came to the conclusion that whatever the truth was, I will maintain my Catholic faith, practice my faith to the best that I could. And I concluded that there was perhaps one universal truth that exists, that nobody can deny, that should be the basis of all morality, all theology, and all philosophy. And that is that we are beings of love, that we were created or we came about through evolution, either way, with the purpose of serving others, especially the poor and the vulnerable. This had to be, for me, the universal truth, and it would suffice for the next 30 years. I went through different careers and did all kinds of different things, and through it all, I tried to live by that universal truth. At the same time, holding on to my Catholic faith, but always questioning, always tormented, always torn inside. And then at the age of 50, having lived the life I lived with its ups and downs and good and bad, joy and sorrow like all of you, I finally broke free of it all and began my search earnestly once again to find truth. And this new search led me to where I've been for the last 15 years. And it led to the writing of one of my books that you can get on Amazon, My 3 Promises, Your Path to Happiness. And even after writing this book, upon reflecting on it for a year, I would have to say, I have to admit that I'd go back and I'd change some things. Because although the book is about happiness and finding happiness, it does seek to point out what is true. And I go back to my 20s once again, where I believe in that universal truth, that we are all created as loving beings, and our purpose is to love and serve others. So let's take a look at Nietzsche. And when I talk about Nietzsche, you'll understand why I gave that rather lengthy introduction there about my life, as boring as it could be to you. So Nietzsche was born in 1844, and he died at the year 1900. At the age of 44, by that time he had written a lot of material. He wasn't well known, really, till later in his life, closer to his death, and then after his death he became very famous. But up until the age of 44, he was not well known, and he wasn't read, throughout the Western world. But at the age of 44, he suffered a major collapse and lost all his mental faculties. And for the next 11 years, he was cared for by his mother and then his sister Elizabeth until he died in 1900. So here's a man that was tormented all his life with finding truth, finding out, is there a universal truth? What is that universal truth? And if I can't find it, he felt it was his responsibility to tell the world what it was, because he abandoned all religion. He abandoned all his traditional beliefs, and his father was a minister, although his father died when he was very young, 5 years old, and that definitely had an effect on him. But he criticized all of the traditional European morality. He criticized religion and all conventional philosophical ideas, as well as the political and social pieties, even democracy. So you could see here a man that looked at the world, really digging deep, tormented to find truth, and through it all, we wonder if he was even satisfied with what he did discover. You often hear of Nietzsche, you hear the death of God. He talked about how God was dead, and that basically humans killed God. We killed him. But he thought this was a good thing, because with the death of God, there would be in us absolute freedom, because we are the sole measure of the universe. We have responsibilities, each and every one of us, to become the God, to become perfect, to become this moral person. And we have to do it on our own. We are a light unto ourselves. And maybe this is another reason why Nietzsche appealed to me, because that's very Buddhist. That's very Eastern in a lot of ways. So basically he believed that we killed God. And even with the church, there is no absolute truth. The church teaches us things that is not absolute truth. They teach us things that are actually maybe convenient for them, maybe to maintain order in society, maybe to create the herd mentality where we all go along and we follow these set of norms and rules. But he felt that the church had no absolute truth. And we see this every day in our lives. We have politicians with what they consider to be true. They're dumping it on us constantly. Is what they speak truth? Politicians? I don't think so. We look at the church. Is what the church teach us truth? I think that modern man now is saying, churches are empty. Like they're not speaking to us, and they're not what they have taught us for centuries. A lot of it is in great question. So you have to, according to Nietzsche, make your own effort. You have to work at it, and think of yourself as a great liberator. But with the death of God, now there is this great void in life. And as I mentioned before, Nietzsche wanted to be the new moralist. He wanted to be the one that would shape this new morality and tell us what it is so that we would have some guideline for moral truth. Maybe this is what caused the collapse of his mental faculties, that he pushed himself to the point where, as a limited, frail human being like we all are, he didn't know what they were. So Nietzsche blurred the lines between good and evil, as he believed they needed each other. They blended in together. And you could see in his teachings that he is tormented. He says every true faith is infallible. It performs what the believing person hopes to find in it, but does not offer the least support for the establishment of an objective truth. Here the ways of men divide. If you want to achieve peace of mind and happiness, have faith. But if you want a disciple of truth, then search. So, if you want to live like I wanted to, a comfortable life, I didn't want to be tormented, I didn't want to step out of the life I was living as a North American white male Catholic. If I wanted to insulate myself in that life, then I stayed in that life. And so if you find happiness and peace of mind by having faith, if it helps you through difficult times and you use it as basically a crutch, and this brings you happiness, fine. But if you want to be a disciple of what is true, then you have to begin your search. And this search is very painful. So he believes that the Christian God cannot be believed in. God is created by man to answer questions that man can't answer, to provide a safety net for when we go through difficult times, to rationalize suffering and hunger, and all these things. So we have a God, and we have an afterlife. We believe in an afterlife to accommodate other inner turmoils that humans go through, to answer questions. Somebody dies young, a child dies while they're in a better place because we've created heaven. This is what God wanted. He gives some kind of rational thought to, the unexplainable. But really, when we look at it, is that what we really believe? And if it is what we really believe, that's beautiful, because it provides us with, a justification for whatever's happening in the world. It's what God wills. It's what God wants. We're in a better place. If those are the things we want to believe, that's fine. And in that we may find peace and happiness. But is that true? And for Nietzsche, of course, it's not. So we have to be masters of ourselves. We have to, he calls it will to power. We have to have self-mastery. And we do this through acquiring as much knowledge as possible about our bodies and our minds. We have to be a people who are self-making. So you see there, it's very individualistic. Thinking of yourself, being your own master, your own guide. So this is, it's rather radical, especially coming out of the 1800s, late 1800s. So what is good? For Nietzsche, everything that heightens the power in a person, the will to power, power itself is good. What is bad? Everything that is born of weakness. This weakness, these things born of weakness, are more harmful than any vice. Active pity, is one of the deadliest things we can have. We feel sorry for ourselves. We think of reasons to be pious, but in that it's just an excuse, and we feel self-pity. He says Christianity is the religion of pity, and pity deprives us of being strong. So you see here the real focus on each and every individual. There's no time to feel sorry for oneself. There's no time to use excuses for things. There's no time to create all these things about religion, whether it's the existence of God or all these dogmas and doctrines to get by in life. We have to be more than that. We have to be a person who is willing to step out of that and seek real truth. So he wanted to design a new morality now that there's this terrible voidness. But as I said, he couldn't do it. And in this process of moving, all of us moving from, I guess you could say, moving from being an animal to becoming a god. So moving from imperfection to perfection is self-overcoming and be able to rise above everything to become who we really are or who we should really be, and that's godlike, is very difficult, very painful. Who can do it? Well, maybe we'll conclude with some people in history that may have done it. So there's 4 precepts to Nietzsche I want to mention. His work is very complicated. He's very difficult to read. And so we're just trying to, in this podcast, summarize it and apply it to our own life. So the 4 precepts are, according to Nietzsche, number 1, own up to envy. Don't feel shame, like Christianity promotes, where you feel shame. Use envy instead to become the person you are envious of. So if you're envious of someone who's very successful, has a high status in life, or has acquired a lot of things, use that envy instead of feeling shame and feeling guilt. Use it to propel yourself to acquire the things that other person has. Face your desires, honor them, and then you can mourn any failures with dignity. So own up to envy, precept number 1. Number 2, don't be a Christian. When he read the New Testament, he said only Pontius Pilate is to be admired in the New Testament. Christianity was made up of weak people who did not have the courage of going after what they really wanted, and so they made a virtue of cowardice. That's pretty radical. Christians, he said, become the herd, where we can't enjoy the world, like sex, status, creativity, etc., because the church has taught us that these things are bad. So they promote a sexless society, and we call that purity. So we take, the things that really are part of who we truly are, and then we're asked to deny those things, like sex, status, creativity. And when we deny these things and we can't really enjoy the world or become who we truly are, we call that piety. We give it a virtue. And some people say it's humility. Others would call it a false humility. So weakness, human weakness, we call goodness. Submission to other people even to people that we hate or disagree with. The church gives it the virtue of obedience. Not being able to take revenge on someone who has done harm and deserves justice, we turn that into the virtue of forgiveness. So Christianity becomes a great machine for bitter denial. The third precept is, he said, never drink alcohol. Alcohol and Christianity are alike in that they numb the pain in life and they reassure you that everything is fine. There's no motivation when you tie yourself to your faith or you take drugs or alcohol. There's no motivation to change your life because religion and alcohol numb you and convince you that everything is great. You have to live dangerously to get things done. You have to be adventurous. The fourth precept, God is dead. Saying that, like we've mentioned before, that religious beliefs are false, but what they do is they help us cope with life. And Nietzsche felt, although he didn't come up with a new religion, a new morality, he did say that religion should be replaced with things like philosophy, art, music, culture. This is where the answers are, especially in philosophy, that isn't relying on a religion to answer questions. It becomes more, scientific in that you've got to be rational and use the thought like that. So all of Nietzsche's work challenges universal truth. And we're challenged in life to question the things that we've been told by everyone, by our parents, by our society, by our church, by our workplace, by our community. We're always should be challenging. We should always be challenging these things that we've been told, and many of these things we've been told as to the right way of living, the right way of acting, is for the benefit of those telling us. It either makes them richer or it makes life more comfortable for them if we all toe the line. It makes their company more prosperous, whatever the situation is. But what is it doing for you? What is it doing for the human being who wants to seek truth? And so these universal truths that we're in search of, what are they? And to this day, I ask myself that question, what are they? I do hold on to the belief that I had as a young man that we are all beings of love and that our purpose in life is to love and serve others. And through loving and serving and living a virtuous life, virtues in the sense that they serve the ultimate purpose of loving and serving, not virtues that serve a church, an organization, a society, or a culture. No, virtues for the purpose, the sole purpose of living the true loving life. This, for me personally, is the universal morality. And of course, that doesn't answer all the moral questions that comes to one through life. We have what's called situation ethics, where in every situation, there isn't a universal truth that tells you exactly how to respond. But if that is the foundation, if that's the primary motivator in all that we do, which is love and serving others and elevating others to higher ground, if that is the driving force within us, then you can say that that's the new religion. That is reality. But even I may be wrong. I look at the world religions, and I look at Buddhism and Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism, Shintoism. What do they all say? Basically, they're saying that is the universal truth. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is the universal principle that runs through all the religions. Compassion is the key to happiness. And compassion is truth, in that when we live the loving life, when we become beings of love, that we are living out who we truly are. And when we live out who we truly are, we not only find true happiness, but we also are living out truth. That is truth. And I could be wrong. Maybe truth is something other than that, or something more than that. And I think that in terms of a more comprehensive look at that is you look at the virtues. And the virtues are a great guide as to how we should live that life of love in terms of forgiveness, love, charity, courage, prudence, temperance, fortitude, all these things. So, but like I said, the virtues serving the fundamental nature of what we are, and that is beings of love. And I think those are the mirrors of reality. So I think that the challenge for all of us is to pursue truth, find the strength to leave behind what you've been taught and what you've been told. We have to be careful here, because we don't want to become like Nietzsche, end up going crazy and end up in some mental state that we're dysfunctional. But in our own way in life, we do seek truth, and it's not going to be easy. It's a very painful thing. It's like moving. You got to gather up all your stuff, get rid of a lot of stuff, load up the trucks. You got to move. There's some inconvenience and aggravation and suffering involved. Moving on in life, in anything, involves disrupting what we have become comfortable with, and that is painful. That is suffering. But we can't blindly accept what we have been told is the norm. So that's what I say to you today based on Nietzsche. What I say to you is, don't blindly accept what is called the norm. Don't blindly go through life and accept everything you've been told. In politics, religion, in every aspect of your life, be willing to suffer. And think through this suffering, or although you will suffer, think of the wonder of the journey, the adventure, the excitement, the beauty, the discovery of all very new things. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. So if you have a child, and I mentioned this in other podcasts, I like to mention children and parents and students in school. If you have a child as a parent, or if you have a student as a teacher who has an insatiable appetite of curiosity, and who is always in search, bucking the system, looking for something that is looking for what they consider their pursuit of truth, and not just accepting everything, you may have in your classroom or in your home, your child or student may be a great mind. They are someone who is different, and this pursuit on their part should be encouraged and supported and elevated, Don't view it as necessarily a troublemaker or an obstacle or a pain in the neck. No, view this as, wow, this is someone, I am blessed to have a child like this or a student in my classroom like this who doesn't just blanketly and blindly accept everything they're told by society and even their church. I have someone here who may make a real difference in history. Just like Jesus made a real difference in history because he no longer accepted the traditional ways of thinking of his Judaic background. And although he didn't, in the case of Jesus, a little bit more complicated, he accepted the old ways of thinking. He was Jewish and he practiced it and he studied it, but he knew that the truth wasn't all there. He had to make people more aware of what he considered to be true. He paid a big price for it, as we all know, and he suffered for it, but he changed the world because of his pursuit of what is true. The Buddha, same thing. He left the confines of a palace and a comfortable life in search of what he believed to be true, because he believed Hinduism didn't have all the answers, and he refused to accept the teachings and the norms he was taught. And he went out to find his truth. And the same with all these great leaders, great religious leaders, great people in history, great thinkers, and the same with inventors and everybody. So when we have someone in our life who bucks the system, who seems to be a thorn in our side, this person actually can be destined for greatness. And that ends our podcast today on one of the great minds in history, Friedrich Nietzsche. I hope that you found this interesting, and certainly go out there and get stuff on Nietzsche and watch documentaries on Nietzsche, and I think that he challenges all of us to become better people in spite of his very radical teachings. And he's difficult to understand, he's difficult to read, but I'm confident that you'll enjoy it and he'll inspire you to move forward and step out of the herd and become your own person with your own adventures and your own pursuits and your own greatness. So thank you for joining us today on Dr. Doctor, and we look forward to having you back and talking again. And of course, Junior will be back, and we will be talking about the great mind, Isaac Newton. Have a great day and a great week.